D-Day, May 31st, 2023. At least that's true if you own any pistol braces, because that's the very last day to register if you are going to do that, or else suffer ye consequences most foul. That's right, if you're not going to do something to fix your situation, then your pistol brace, according to the ATF, will be reclassified as a short-barreled rifle, as contraband, and you're facing potentially a decade in prison per device. Let me be clear. I am not happy about any of this. I'm not happy that I have to make this video, but I think everybody needs to hear a video like this where we go through your options. Before I get into that, I want to make it also emphatically clear that, guys, the attorney that I've interviewed multiple times on this channel who's leading the attack against pistol braces still in the Northern District Court of Texas, that preliminary injunction has not been ruled on. So hope remains in the case of Brito v. Garland. So be sure to check out that interview if you're interested. But otherwise, let's unfortunately talk about your options. Guys, let's get into it. So let's return to some initial kind of founding principles, because this is going to kind of govern the whole conversation. We need to talk about what is a short-barreled rifle, because if your firearm does not meet that definition, yes, I know we're setting aside all the pontificating and all that kind of stuff about this whole rule right now. We're focused on just what are your options right now. This isn't rants. This is just what are your options, education. So you need to understand everything comes back to what's the definition of a short-barreled rifle. So we're looking at basically a rifle that does not meet both criteria, does not meet both. So you have to check both boxes, or else it is a short-barreled rifle. So you need to have an overall length of 26 inches or more, and you need to have a 16-inch barrel or more. So you need to have both 16-inch barrel and 26-inch overall length. Now check how these measurements are done in your local jurisdiction, because I have some information out there that it may vary. So for instance, I'm here in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, we measure from the overall length. So if you have a telescoping tube for an AR-15 telescoping buffer, you extend to the maximum overall length. If you have a side folder, you measure from the maximum overall length. But I know that that has not always been the case in every jurisdiction. Likewise, where do you measure from the barrel? Is it from the back of the chamber, in other words, where the breech closes, or is it where the grooves start? I can't speak to every single one of the 50 states out there. So just make sure that you don't take these things for granted. Do your measurements on this. All right. Also keep in mind that, of course, you are not going to be able to lawfully register, if you choose to do so, a short-barrel rifle in every single jurisdiction. Many jurisdictions, including the District of Columbia and a number of states, just verboten. Don't try. The ATF will deny you. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that you're out of options. All your options are going to suck. That's just what it boils down to. We are going to go through the analysis of what happens if you choose not to comply, and we're also going to hit a lot of big FAQs, so stick around. But first, we're going to go through kind of your canonical options as outlined by the ATF. Option number one that the ATF wants you to consider, unsurprisingly, number one, submit through the e-form system an application to make and register a firearm. In other words, an ATF e-form 1 prior to May 31st, 2023. Again, not everybody can do this. I recognize this. So be sure once more, check your local listings about where things are, about what your options may be. Also keep in mind that these forms can be a little bit technical. So this is not something to do, save it for 9 o'clock at night. There's pictures, there's other things. You need to set aside some time. Don't try to do this on the very last day if you are choosing to do this. And again, the ATF is saying before May 31st, 2023. Your second option, permanently remove or alter the stabilizing brace so that it cannot be reattached, and thereby removing it from the regulation as a firearm under the NFA, or National Firearms Act. So here's the analysis on that. Be careful. If you take the stabilizing brace off, that you're not going to be subjective to something called constructive possession, or sometimes on the internet known as constructive intent. What am I talking about? I did a whole long video on this subject. We'll link that in the comment field, or pardon, in the description below on the Attorney Tom Grieve channel. But guys, very briefly, it's this. When do parts legally consider becoming a gun? Because if you basically have a pile of gun parts that can only be assembled into an illegal contraband firearm, then according to the U.S. Supreme Court, and especially according to the ATF, that is constructive possession, that you have basically assembled that, legally speaking, into that contraband firearm, i.e. felony. Again, the long version's on another video, but the short version is that you need to ensure that the firearm can be constructed into a lawful consideration. So this is not something like, oh, if you're going to do it, just take off the device, throw it into a corner, don't think about it. No, 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 no. You need to make sure that things are properly observed where the laws are considered here. All right. And I'm not saying that I like that. I'm not saying you have to like that, but I am saying that you need to know what these laws are. Ignorance is unfortunately no excuse sometimes. Number 3, remove the short barrel and attach a 16-inch or longer rifle barrel to the firearm, thus removing it from the provisions of the NFA. The analysis here, well, obviously, number 1, this is only an option for folks who can do this. So primarily looking at all of you in AR-15 land where you can just easily click, click, detach the upper, click, click, attach a new one. That's apparently the sound I make when I'm doing that in my head. Just as obviously, this may be really not an option for many other folks unless they have access to sometimes maybe not the sort of equipment such as presses and so forth that everybody has in their basement. Maybe you're just not mechanically inclined enough to do that. So the bottom line again is this is not something to be thinking about hours before the deadline goes into effect. All right. This is something you need to have been hopefully mapping out for some time. There may still be some time. If you are not mechanically inclined, you don't have the tools to do this, but you want to know more, contact a qualified local gunsmith in order to help you out and learn what your options may be. Number 4, both number 4 and number 5 are awful, but let's power through them quickly. Number 4, turn the firearm into your local ATF office. Analysis, don't do this. But if for some crazy reason you do, they're going to hand you a property form, probably form 3400.1 or 3400.1 or 3400.1. I've heard it all sorts of different ways. That's the consent to forfeiture or destruction of property and waiver of notice. Code for you're turning this in and you're agreeing that it's gone, you've relinquished all rights, you've waived all rights. If you turn in under number 4, for God's sake, number 1, just don't do that. But if you are going to do that, don't do this option. If you're going to do that for some crazy reason, do the 3400.23, the 3400.23. That's the one where you are not necessarily waiving and relinquishing all property rights and agreeing to forfeiture, all right, as well as destruction, I'll add. So make sure that you understand what the proper forms are. Don't be bullied or hoodwinked. I've heard lots of stories from folks around the country dealing with FRTs and all sorts of other things where they have some colorful anecdotes, let's say, with dealing with ATF agents. So don't put up with the games. If for some crazy reason you're going to go down that road, sign the right form, 3400.23. Number 5, destroy the firearm. Analysis, really don't. Number 4 and 5 are both just kind of no-brainer. Don't do these. But again, I want to cover all the options that ATF have given. Look, both 4 and 5 are 2 stripes of awful. Don't do it. All right, so let's get to some of the FAQs, and we're going to wrap up with the analysis of basically should you, shouldn't you, so to speak. Some of the FAQs. So we're going to power through some of the most common questions that I get, because if I'm getting them at my office, I know you down the lens often are going to be asking them as well. Number 1, if you do the e-form, you do not have to pay the $200. Yes, this information is widely out there, but people still ask me, so you do not have to do that. Keep in mind, this is a special e-form through the ATF website in conjunction with perhaps Silencer Shop and other websites as well. So you need to make sure that you're filling out the proper e-form. Do some research, all right? FAQ number 2, if you do the e-form 1, you can still swap stocks after it's registered in an SBR to a real rifle stock. People keep asking me that. You have to be stuck with the pistol stabilizing brace at that point. Once it's an SBR, it's an SBR, and on you go. Number 3, FAQs. You cannot use a trust unless you can show that the trust owned the firearm prior to when the rule was published on January 31st, 2023. Okay, so yes, if you do want to get this into a trust, if you own an NFA gun trust or whatever it is that you call it, you're going to have 2 different routes to get the firearm there. Route 1, the free e-form, and then you form for it later to the trust, or you don't do the free e-form, you just do a regular Form 1 to your trust, but then you're paying the $200. You also don't get the next 2 things that are coming up. Next option coming up from the FAQs, there's no 922R compliance issues because it goes into effect when it's assembled per ATF application. So there's no 922R compliance issues. Arguably, this is the only silver lining, particularly for you CZ and HK guys out there. You don't have to source American-made parts for your CZ or HKs. Not saying in any way, shape, or form I support the rule, but there it is. There's also no engraving requirement per question number 30 on the ATF FAQs, linked in the description box below. So you can adopt the markings on your existing firearm. This exception is only applicable to firearms that are registered pursuant to the final rule. If the firearm is a private manufactured firearm or PMF, then the ATF says that you must mark it in accordance with 27 CFR 478.92 as well as 479.102 prior to submitting the E-Form 1. If you purchase a pistol brace after January 31st, 2023, or if your firearm was made after that date, then you do not have the option to do the E-Form 1 worth the tax forbearance, 922R, all that kind of stuff. SOL, doesn't apply to you. Keep in mind, you can also unregister these devices from the NFA later. You can also sell your brace to someone who wants to make an SBR, but remember, again, constructive intent, constructive possession issues still apply. You can also remove and attach your brace to another firearm, but that doesn't get you out of this mess unless that other firearm's an SBR, because now you still have all the same issues. So if you can't just swap it from one pistol to the next pistol and say, oh, I'm fine. No, not the way that works. Okay. So guys, here's a big one. If you apply, even if you have not heard back from the ATF, you can still be in possession of the device. However, while you're awaiting the background check and the approval, you need to maintain proof of submission as evidence of the continued lawful possession per the ATF. So even if you do not have your Form 1 returned successfully by May 31st, it doesn't mean that you're stuck and you have to disassemble, destroy, or do one of those awful options above. It just means that you have to show proof of the submission of evidence by that time. If you've not already done so, please consider clicking like on this video. It tells the algorithm you're getting something out of this and other people may get something out of this too. So it's a great way of helping us share the news, so to speak. Also, let us know in the comment field below what questions you have. If we get enough, we'll definitely consider doing a quick follow-up video on this, kind of a part 2. And of course, to make sure you don't miss any other future content coming out, please consider clicking subscribe as well. Okay, so let's get to what you want to hear about. If you do not register, then you are facing years in prison per violation if caught. In other words, if you have 2 different devices, you're looking at potentially up to 20 years in prison, depending upon your jurisdiction. And again, depending upon your jurisdiction, you can be prosecuted at both the local, state, as well as federal level. So you need to be mindful of that. Now, of course, I understand that there's a huge advantage that many see out there for not registering. In other words, mass non-compliance. Last I heard a couple weeks ago, there had been approximately 150,000 of these E-Form 1s that had been completed. Considering the fact that there are literally millions and millions and millions of these devices out there, we may be looking at a mass non-compliance situation. Keep in mind, ATF estimates there are millions. Private estimations put these potentially in the tens of millions, as high as 40 million out there. So 150,000 is a literal drop in the proverbial bucket of what's out there. But also keep in mind that as a licensed attorney, it is illegal for me to go out and tell people to break the law. So I must be emphatically clear in case someone out there decides to report me to the bar that I'm only describing this option. I am in no way endorsing this option. Frankly, I'm not endorsing any option other than the fact that you get educated about your options. If you do choose to register, then of course the advantages are that you're protecting yourself from prison if all goes according to the plan with the application process. And again, I recognize that not everybody can register subject to your time and place. So this isn't even an option for everyone. If you do have an SBR, this is extremely important. You are now going to be in possession of an NFA item, which means there's going to be tight laws and regulations that you may not be aware of concerning crossing state lines, higher penalties if you choose to use them illegally in self-defense. Also, you cannot just sell, transfer, or even loan these devices to friends. It's an all-around nightmare and a headache, and one that we shouldn't be subjected to. But due to ATF waffling, here we are. So guys, I hope you got something out of this video, and as always, we will see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.